We bonded more as a people when we were four regions: the Midwest, the Northern, the Eastern, and Western regions than we now do when we are 36 states. I challenge any one of us to read out without pausing the names of existing 36 states, not to talk of the names affixed to them as leaders. If, as the advocates maintain that state creation was meant to promote development, may I ask with all sincerity, where now is the evidence of development? Show me. The end result, as we now know and see, staring us clearly in the face, is that our internal fissions have widened and deepened. Far from being the flying eagle of our dream, or the giant Africa we have aspired to be, we have all now become sitting ducks to a multiplicity of insecurity, manifested in the triumph of mediocrity over merit. Decay of infrastructures in almost all sectors, in spite of our efforts: power, roads, houses, public transportation, water, jobs, and industries. The root causes, as far as I'm concerned, are also traceable to our wasteful and flamboyant lifestyle, frequently featured and advertised on bad days. Look at what happened just 2 days ago. About 45 million naira was spent on the birthday to celebrate this house of a leader of one of our nations. Marriages, obituaries, congratulatory messages by sycophants, predominantly paid for from public funds. Deeply more worrying, the tragic and hideous cost in property and lives. We do not know, or can we identify who the enemies are? Are they from within or outside our country? However, not all has been gloomy. There have been many, many bright spots, but have they been enough? We are now witnessing the rebirth of tribalism in the country. Rife in the early 40s, during my boyhood days in Lagos, in the days of the nationalist movement and struggle for independence. Soon after, tribalism became an ugly, demeaning word and epithet. No one wanted to be labeled a tribalist, or even worse, an arch-tribalist. It has now once again, rarely said, transmuted into camouflage concepts and lingo. We now have names like the Old Republic, the Proscribed Republic of Biafra, the Afenifere, the Yoruba World Congress, the Ohanese Ndigbo, the Igbo World Congress, the Arewa Consultative Committee Forum, the Northern Elders Forum, the Miete Allah, PANDEF, the North Central People's Forum, and many other such groupings dotted across our country. What a country. Their leaders publicly flaunt their ethnic origins, a few in clownish apparels and colorful caps, some as high as a camel, as big as an elephant, the aim of promoting their cultural heritage. I respect the organizers of these groupings. I concede to them the right to form and belong to associations of their choice. Would they, however, in their eminent positions, not have configured their groupings differently to enhance national rather than sectional unity? As highly respected and prominent leaders who had once held positions of trust and power at all levels, are they not conscious of the fact that they are setting a bad example the many who still look up to them as national leaders, should they not be setting a higher example as notable emissaries of a united country? There is, in addition, the emerging trend of the narrow concept of nationality. The European Union, the Thief Nation, the George, even probably the Arinoman Nation, where I come from, and many more. I have my doubts about facts now being projected as national leadership. Why should I be persuaded to subscribe to the notion of nationalities within one nation? It could be the breeding ground for manipulative, ambitious, fruitless tribal warlords, posing and masquerading as the leaders of their peoples. They feed very sadly, in my opinion, into the centrifugal forces presently tearing our nation apart. Let us now briefly touch on a few burning issues of our time. Our constitution, as imperfect as it may be, is not really the main problem. There's never a perfect constitution anywhere in the world. The problem is how, in spite of imperfections, we relate to one another, whether when raising controversial issues like restructuring, resource control, through federalism, enhancement, farmers clashing. All these issues must clearly be placed on the table for serious scrutiny and solution. Where there is the will and an open mind to discuss and accommodate each other's point of view, there is no problem that is impossible of a compromise solution. Where the problem really lies is in closing and slamming the doors to discussion. Weakness lies in having a closed mind, strength in keeping an open mind. Eventually, through dialogue, a solution acceptable to all will be found, but never expect it to be a perfect solution. There is no perfection in life. We would like to see our governments at federal and state levels design special social, cultural, and economic programs specifically targeted at the grassroots, meant to unify our people, irrespective of our ethnic origins. Programs like the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, Technical Aid Corps, TAC, National Youth Service Corps, NYSC, have been mindful, but are losing their luster and the very essence of their being. Government should, as a matter of principle, embark on those programs that will unite rather than divide us. Why should state of origin feature in official forms, not meant strictly for statistical planning? Why can we not broaden the requirements for state citizenship to include those who have resided in the state for an agreed length of time, say for instance, for more than 10 to 50 years? Why should citizenship of a state not be conferred by virtue of place of birth? Why should the automatic right of citizenship by marriage still be an issue in 21st century Nigeria? Why should we not look again at the misuse and abuse of the land use decree by agencies of the federal and state governments and expunge such abuses from our statute books in order to promote a sense of belonging and unity among the ordinary citizenry of Nigeria. And we increase the number of skilled vocational institutions along the length and breadth of this country to soak in school and non-school leavers, thus making them employable in an era of declining industries, which must be boosted. Can we also take a second look at some of our national policies, like the quota system in education, that creates arbitrary cut-off marks for students from various states, even in the same schools, as basic admission into federal and state educational institutions? This discriminatory practice invariably creates a feeling of inequality and unfairness, and may permanently affect children's psyche at a very tender age. Can we tactfully and most respectively beam some delicate light on the constitutional role of the Council of State and how it is functioning? Should we also do the same thing with the role of the revered spouses of heads of states and state governors? Can we declare as completely unacceptable, if not abominable, entrusting to a handful of Nigerians ownership of all wealth, which should, with patriotic management, belong to all? May I suggest such ownership be revoked? Can we enact and enforce the most draconian laws to punish treasury looters in high places, sparing none, whoever they may be? Those should be handsome and welcome gifts to Nigerians as we mark the 60th anniversary of our independence. Probably much more rewarding than the palliative handouts. What, for instance, can our governments do with our languages as veritable tools for promoting national cohesion and unity? Can they do more to encourage the learning of Nigerian languages in schools from the elementary to the university level, establish more open universities, and encourage many more students to take recognized degree courses in our languages, thus forging greater unity amongst our peoples? Another area of intense interest is religion, which is one of our obvious fault lines. Admittedly, it is a difficult, complex, sensitive, delicate, and inflammatory issue in a gaping multi-religious nation like ours. That is precisely why we should strenuously strive to narrow the gap between the faithfuls beyond what is now currently done. A desperate problem requires a desperate solution. We must find a way forward. We should encourage experimentation in Christian and Muslim worshipings together. To incubate this idea, I find appealing the concept of two faiths under one roof. I'm not necessarily talking here about sharing prayers perfunctorily, as we now do, on purely ceremonial occasions. Can mutually acceptable forms of worship be crafted by divinely inspired religious scholars and leaders to promote increasing religious harmony, leading to peace, love, and national cohesion? Would the Almighty God, Allah, whom we all serve or profess to serve, reject our joint, common, unified veneration, adoration, and prayers? Must we be perpetually stuck to the past in borrowed foreign gaps and forms, in worshiping the everlasting, almighty, all-merciful God? Must we be more popish than the Pope on both sides? I know it is an extremely difficult goal to attain. Believe me, it is absolutely far from my intention to trivialize the depth, security, and transcendent issues of faith. I hope I'm not hovering at the fringes of blasphemy on both sides of the divide. But let us try, at least try again for the sake of country. Foreign policy. Now you creep into the area of our foreign policy. We should work towards a balanced, coordinated approach and harness the instruments of foreign policy to build a strong, united country. There's hardly any need to stating the obvious about the complementarity of a nation's domestic policy and its external efforts. The two are inextricably interwoven and impact one on the other. Our external image needs to be refurbished and reinvigorated. Could we have, for instance, done more when recently we were presented with a unique opportunity as the most popular Black nation on earth to add our voice to the protestation of the Black Lives Matters movement? Why did we remain docile, frozen and bogged down by our own inertia, whatever the reasons? The castration of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has led to its systemic weakening. Is this responsible for its underperformance? Should this be a source of concern to us? Yes, it should. While some see it as reflecting the current state of our nation, I see it as a combination of both the state of the nation and the crumbling weight of its conceptual and structural deformity. To halt and reverse this, I suggest we look seriously into the establishment of a Nigerian diplomatic service that will take charge of our external interests, just as we already have a home service that takes care of the domestic front. The Nigerian diplomatic service should be driven and led by very carefully selected and well-trained men and women, knowledgeable in the theory and practice of international relations. This will enable the nation to promote a robust, wholesome external image of our country and best serve the national interest. The domestic and diplomatic services should both work harmoniously and seamlessly up to and under the direction of the head of state. Of course, there could occasionally be conflict of beneficial ideas. Many have talked about the pivotal role of leadership in the transformation of a nation. I strongly believe in the lofty vision of a strong, disciplined, inspirational leadership that will drive the democratic process forward, cleanse it, stabilize it, and unite the nation. I believe in a leadership which embraces all in equal terms. As an advocate of a strong, united country, my vision of leadership can never be myopic, does not have room for nepotism, and cannot tolerate parochialism. Such practices wear and tear down the very value of the nation. It is manifestly untrue. It is wrong, it is not true. It is corruption in its most reprehensible form, akin to the looting of public funds by those entrusted with it for the welfare of the citizenry, or the denigration of the temples of justice, or the betrayal of trust in the hallowed places of worship in the land. Finally, taking all this into consideration, I remain hopeful that we can still fly as an eagle and be the giant we are destined to be as a nation. God save Nigeria. God bless our country. Happy Independence Day. Thank you once again, Mr. President.
Unmute Christy. Okay. Chrissy Mbono, we are waiting for you for the introduction of the speaker for the day. I saw her. Is she there now? She's speaking. I can't.
Served as a foreign affairs officer. Dr. Moghalu spent childhood in foreign countries among which are Switzerland, Washington,
She's speaking.
Others. So we can say that happily he was cut out to be academic achievements are among the obtained education at the London School of Economics. He obtained MA from the Fletcher School and he obtained LLB from the University of Victoria. He received a certificate at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and the International Monetary Fund (IMF). Professional achievements are huge, but I will be brief. Professor Kingsley is the president and CEO of Moghalu Strategies LLC, a global investment advisory firm in Washington. He was the president of the Institute of Governance and Economic Transformation, IGET, a public policy think tank. He was professor of practice in international and public policy at the Fletcher School of and Diplomacy at South University from 2015 to 2017. Previously served as deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN) from 2009, leading the implementation of extensive reforms that stabilized the Nigeria banking system after the global financial crisis. Payments reforms including the introduction of the unique identifier bank verification, the famous DVA, and the external management, development finance, and financial rules of the CBN. Kingsley Moghalu was a member of the Monetary Policy Committee at the CBN. He served as chairman of the board of directors of Nigeria Export Import Bank, served in the Institution Training Center, FIT, a member of the board of directors of CBN, of Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria (AMCO), represented CBN at Security and Ethics Commission, the Kuala Lumpur Malaysia-based Global Alliance for Financial ASI. He was a member of the President of Nigeria's Economic Management International Appointment. Moghalu has served on high-level international appointments in the United Nations, including as a member of the Intergovernmental Expert Group on Financing Development for the UN Conference on Trade and Development in Nigeria. A member of high-level design panel on the United Nations National Justice System in New York. Also worked for the UN for 72 years in planning, legal, and external affairs at duty stations at the UN headquarters in Cambodia, in Croatia, in Canada, in Switzerland, rising to the highest rank of director. He served UN International Criminal Tribunal in 1997. Later became the International Tribunal. There are also more than he is the author of several books, including the critically acclaimed Emerging Africa, How Global Economy's Last Frontier Can Prosper at Night, and his Global Opinion Commentary has been published in the Financial Times.
Okay, Chris is broken, people can't hear what she's saying. Yeah.
Yes, she did not.
That's just such a shame. Yeah, so one is not being properly introduced. Nobody can hear what she's saying, Maybe somebody should cut her off and call her and tell her what to do so that she can make a proper introduction. Maybe, yeah. Okay. Oh, okay, I see. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Yeah.
He was the presidential candidate in Nigeria 2019 general election. The election he did not because he didn't have a rich manifesto. I believe he have opportunity. His personal life is married to a barrister, Marianne, a banker, and the marriage with children. Social corporate responsibility. King philanthropy. Professor Kingsley Moghalu is the founder. The Isaac Moghalu Foundation, IMOF, an educational foundation for underprivileged rural communities established in 2005 in memory of Isaac Moghalu. Here I have the pleasure to present my brother, an icon, and I to this August budget. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, we now invite the speaker for the day, Professor Moghalu, to take the floor and speak to us. Professor, a very big welcome. I know it's early morning in New York. Thank you. Welcome.
Global.
Prof, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Yes, sorry about the technical hitches, but you have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay. But I'm not on the screen.
You're on the screen. We are seeing you very well.
Okay, all right. Okay. I don't know, for some reason it's not showing me on my own screen, but that's okay. Very good. That's great. This is what it should be. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, distinguished ambassadors, plenipotentiaries, fellow compatriots. Let me first of all pay my respects to the chairman, Ambassador Ignatius Olisaemeka, one of Nigeria's finest diplomats. I've had the honor of meeting him personally in the last few months. And I thank you, sir, for that very, very erudite and powerful speech that you gave as the chairman. Let me also thank the president, Ambassador Shinkaye, Ambassador Joe Keshi, Ambassador Christine Bono, and all the wonderful colleagues who have helped to organize this event. I'm actually speaking from Washington, D.C., not New York, Joe, but just for the record. I'm going to be speaking this morning on, the title of my lecture is Quo Vadis, Nationhood, Development, and Democracy in Nigeria. And in this lecture, I will be looking at the challenges of nationhood that Nigeria has faced and how I think we should address them. I will be looking at development, and then I will be looking at democracy briefly. So it's a very comprehensive and wide-ranging subject, but I have chosen that subject because I think they are all interconnected. And nationhood is where it all begins. One of the problems that we have when speaking about Nigeria, and I must confess to this, is the tension or the conflict of expectations. Sometimes you want to be very honest about what the situation is in our country. But also, we also find that sometimes being honest is a problem. But the problem is that if you have a character that leads you towards honesty, you'll have difficulty being anything else. And so while one will, of course, be respectful, it's important that we say the truth about the situation in our country. And I would urge all of us who are listening and beyond for us to keep an open mind when we discuss the matter of nationhood in Nigeria. Let's not get our backs up. Let's not feel too defensive because of our identity, religious or ethnic. No. We're looking at how Nigeria can become a nation and prosper. So I just wanted to give that introduction before I go into my remarks. Now, speaking about nationhood, as we mark Nigeria's 60th anniversary, I will also say, by the way, that I'm not going to read my lecture verbatim. I'll speak to it, but I'll be sending the lecture to Ambassador Shinkai and Ambassador Joe, and so it will be circulated because it's quite a number of pages. So I wouldn't want to bore you by reading it all. But as we mark our 60th anniversary as a country, it is obvious to any observer or any participant in our political affairs, in our economic affairs, social and business life, that ours is a deeply troubled country. We've seen some comments recently by a former president and head of state, responses from the government, additional comments by a Nobel laureate. These are very weighty interventions, including the responses from the government, even if some of us would have preferred that there would have been more focus on the issues rather than the personalities. And this is a habit I hope we will change in Nigeria. Let's engage on the issues. All over the world, countries have problems. They solve it based on the issues, but I think that ad hominem attacks do not help us to get to the bottom of our problems of nationhood and development. So we are an unwieldy country. We are a country divided, riven by sectarian tensions, distrust, fiscal economic failure, rising poverty, and a massive class divide. We have no unity of vision or purpose for Nigeria's future and destiny. That's obvious to me as a citizen of Nigeria. We are an unwieldy amalgam of nearly 400 ethnic nationalities, 500 local languages, and 2 dominant religions. We have a population of about 206 million people, the 7th most populous country in the world. Nigeria is a personification of complex diversity. Like virtually all other countries in Africa, we were a creation, an arbitrary creation of a European colonial power. Just one of several examples of colonial powers making administrative arrangements for their own convenience and just arbitrarily demarcating countries, cutting off ethnic nationalities and splitting them into various countries. We are officially, Nigeria that is, the product of the Treaty of Amalgamation of 2014. Now, that amalgamation is very important because the colonialists, from the very beginning, when they did the amalgamation of the Northern and Southern Protectorate, they referred to that amalgamation as a marriage, quote unquote. They called it a marriage. The main purpose of the amalgamation, let us be clear, there were 2 purposes for the amalgamation. One, it was for the administrative convenience of the colonial power. Before then, we had the colony of Lagos established in 1861. We now had the protectorate of Northern Nigeria in 1900 and the protectorate of Southern Nigeria. Lagos was merged into Southern Nigeria in 1906. And in 1914, the colonialists merged everything together for 2 reasons. 1, administrative convenience, and 2, to use the relative economic wealth of the Southern Protectorate to subsidize Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. To use the relative economic wealth of the Southern Protectorate to subsidize the Northern Protectorate. For several years, the British Treasury had been funding the North, deficit financing, the Northern Protectorate. And they were getting they were not willing to continue doing this. And so they decided to merge the two protectorates for that purpose, so that they will be relieved also from the responsibility of deficit financing of the Northern Protectorate. I want to quote Lord Harcourt. Lord Harcourt was the colonial secretary in the United Kingdom. On January 1, 1914, the date of the amalgamation, Lord Harcourt said as follows, and I quote, "We have released Northern Nigeria from the leading strings of the treasury. The promising and well-conducted youth is now on an allowance of his own and is about to effect an alliance with a Southern lady of means. I have issued the special license, and Sir Frederick Lugard will perform the ceremony. May the union be fruitful and constant," end quote. So this is the mindset of those who were in charge of the destiny of this great land of ours at that time. So the design behind the marriage is at once obvious. One, the gender of the two partners was predetermined and preassigned. As you can see from this quote from the mind of Lord Harcourt, the North was male and the South was female, the lady of means. And the South was to provide the economic foundation of the Union. So this tension was reduced later, several decades later, when we had the Macpherson Constitution and Nigeria became a federation. So the different regions became responsible for their own governance, essentially. So, but of course, later on, this tension came back again when the military intervened and introduced a unitary type of constitution. Nigeria never, and Ambassador Olisaemeka spoke eloquently to this, that Nigeria started life on a rickety foundation. Started life as a country as a rickety foundation, on a rickety foundation. So we had the three regions and later the fourth one, the Midwest region, created to accommodate the demands of the ethnic nationalities in the Western region. We never had unity of vision before we became independent. Nigeria did not, unlike several African countries, have one single founding father. Rather, we had at least three. We had Nnamdi Azikiwe, we had Ahmadu Bello, we had Obafemi Awolowo, and they had clashing worldviews. So this was a problem right from the beginning. They reached compromises, but compromises sometimes are not the same thing as unity. So Nigeria performed relatively well in its early years as an independent country. I think it's important that we remember that. And this was thanks largely to the federal structure, because the regions were competing. And this led to economic development, certainly relative to the time they were not doing too badly. But the country was politically unstable. And the main reason it was unstable was, of course, because of the foundational issues that, and as I will discuss later, you can be a country, but not a nation. There's a very big difference between being a country and being a nation. So the country became increasingly politically unstable, partly also because of the parliamentary system that was being used at the time. This also brought some instability. And there were fears of the Northern People's Congress Party, led by Ahmadu Bello, trying to dominate the rest of the partners in the federation. And this we saw in the crisis in the Western region, when the NPC was able to break Awolowo's political base and a crisis ensued in the West. So this was really a very important moment in the history of Nigeria. We had several political crises after that, and all this culminated in the coup of January 15, 1966, led by Major Chukwumanzogu, an Igbo from the Midwest region. Although the January 1966 coup failed because it was suppressed by Major General Agui Ironsi, the head of the Nigerian army at the time, who subsequently assumed power as head of state. The casualties of the Nzogu-led coup were ethnically lopsided. Ahmadu Bello was killed. Tafawa Balewa was killed. Ladoke Akintola was killed. But it turned out that there was no leading Igbo personality who was killed in the coup. In the febrile atmosphere at that time then, the 1966 coup was perceived as, quote unquote, an Igbo coup. But this perception was a wrong perception in the view of many informed people, including the late Major Adebowale Ademoyega, who was one of the principal plotters of the coup. In his book, Why We Struck, he explained that this perception was wrong and why. But I will not go into those details. In July, military officers from the northern region staged a revenge coup that brought Yakubu Gowon to power. A pogrom ensued. Thousands and thousands of Igbos in the north, civilians, were killed. There were several military officers killed, and a lot of them began to leave the rest of the federation, returning to the eastern region. You can imagine how that period was, and most of us are old enough, of course, to remember this. I was very young then, so I can't tell you that I can describe what happened firsthand. But of course, I was listening to my parents. At that time, my father was a Foreign Service officer in Washington, D.C. But in 1967, we had to return to the Eastern region. And we went through the Civil War. We know what happened, how it ended. Ojukwu going into exile, millions of people dead. That's a very sad part of Nigeria's history. So let me come to where all this has brought us today. We are facing a quest, an elusive quest for nationhood. Today, Nigeria is a country, yes, and some of us would see our continued existence as one geographical entity, as an achievement. But some would say, not necessarily so. That's a very low bar of ambition, because a country does not exist simply to exist. A country should exist to make progress. And we can look at two examples. Haiti became independent in 1804. Up till today, it's still a small and poor country. Brazil became independent, I think, around 1822. But for 100 years, it was under military rule. And then later on, it established a civilian democracy. And then later on, it reconfigured itself as a proper federation. And that's when Brazil took off. Today, it's one of the biggest emerging market economies in the world. Haiti, which is older, is still there struggling. And it's not because of size. There are many small countries that are doing very well. Switzerland is one of them, and so many others. So we tend sometimes to misjudge based on population. So where are we today? Nigeria, as we know it today, as it is designed and operated today, is not working. That's the truth. At the core of our national malaise, our sense of anomie, is a general feeling of dissatisfaction with overly centralized unitary governance in what is nominally a federal republic. So that's the number one reason why we are where we are today. The federal government has sovereignty over all mineral and natural resources and appropriates to itself a majority of the revenues therefrom. And this is an inversion of true federalism. The constitutional powers of the federal government are suffocating Nigeria and preventing our country and our dynamic citizens from making real progress. The second reason we are where we are today and why Nigeria is not working is because there is a strong perception among the country's mainly Christian and Southern populations that the mainly Islamic political Northern elite seeks to dominate the rest of the country's constituent groups. A fear that has increased in recent years, in which, without precedent, the heads of the three arms of government, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, are today Northern Muslims. Fulani killer headsmen have moved southwards, killing, raping, maiming victims in the Middle Belt states, the Southwest, and the Southeast, as they seek to grab farmlands for cattle grazing, with zero judicial accountability for the thousands of lives that have been snuffed out. Meanwhile, in a supreme irony that escapes a lot of Nigerians who fear this domination in their view, Northern Nigeria itself appears to be imploding. That region of the country faces economic depression, faces a lot of insecurity, which has increased over the past decade because of the activities of the Boko Haram terrorist group and the wide prevalence of armed banditry. Secessionist sentiment is on the rise. A number of separatist groups are seeking to break away from Nigeria because they view our country as an irredeemably failing state, unable to guarantee security, justice, and equity for all its citizens. While the independent people of Biafra, IPOB, is a prominent example, there are other groups. In the Yoruba Southwest, looking for Oduduwa Republic, in the Niger Delta part of the country, seeking the establishment of a Niger Delta Republic. The multiplicity and diversity of these groups is an indication that the phenomenon is not an quote-unquote Igbo problem, but has a deeper and wider significance. So today in Nigeria, we have three types of Nigerians. We have Nigerians who believe that the country is not viable anymore and that we should all just go our separate ways peacefully, and you will not persuade them. They have tuned out. They did not start out at this place, but this is where they are now. You have the second group who believe that Nigeria is very deeply troubled, but that something can be done and should be done about this. Then you have the third group, people who believe that nothing is wrong. Nothing really is wrong. Yeah, we have just a few problems, but there's no big deal. Some people just like to agitate because they are not in power. That's why. So you have this type of thinking And that's just where we are. But you see, nationhood, building a sense of nationhood, is a very essential foundation for development and a very essential foundation for successful democracy. Nigeria faces a challenge of nationhood because our country does not meet the most fundamental approaches of defining a nation. I went into some research and found that what the word nation means, there can be two aspects of it. One is a people who have a common history, common culture, common language, which is what you find in many parts of Nigeria today. So in that sense, there are almost 400 nations inside Nigeria. But there's another definition, there's another approach. And I want to read that approach, which defines a nation as, quote, a large body of people associated with a particular territory. And I want to underline the next phrase, that is sufficiently conscious of its unity, emphasis mine, to seek or possess a government. That is to say that it is also possible to build a nation in which there is diversity. It is not impossible. As I will explain later, it's harder, but it's not impossible. So the fact of the matter is that Nigeria is not a nation under the first definition, but possibly could become one under the second definition. Now, but for this to happen, I want to emphasize that there are three conditions that must exist. The first is that we have to have leadership that is visionary, leadership that is capable, leadership that can establish a sense of common purpose and destiny that rises above our internal diversity. This is possible. It's the first condition. And I want to give you the example of Kemal Atatürk of Turkey, who established Turkey as a modern and prosperous state. And one of the first things he had to do was to make Turkey a secular state. Religion had to be made personal in order for the country to rise. This is a very interesting example. The second condition, which flows from the first, is that the leadership of any nation must establish and inculcate a philosophical worldview, an understanding of the world and the country's place in it, a strategy, a system of values that will guide the society, and a sense of distance between the desired goal and where the society is at present, and what has to be done to get to that end state. It's always a journey. It's always a journey. So this worldview is therefore a national ambition that must drive everything else. The country's leadership selection process and standards, governance, the organization of economic activity, defense, and foreign affairs. A powerful example of this is the role of the founding fathers of the United States. We all know about the Federalist Papers, the massive intellectual and philosophical debates that they had among themselves before they were able to settle finally on a constitution. In Africa, we have Rwanda, we have Ethiopia, which in my view are some of the very few examples, of Botswana maybe, or Mauritius, of worldview states. The third condition is that there must be justice and equity. They are essential elements for nation building, especially in a country like ours, Nigeria, where we have so many clashing sectarian identities. So once one or more ethnic or religious groups feel cheated, if they feel quote unquote marginalized, as we say. And if they feel that there is an attempt to dominate, an attempt or an agenda of hegemony, whether it's expressed in a formal way or expressed in an informal way, whether it's expressed all at once or it's expressed in an incremental fashion, once significant groups in a country feel that they are threatened by such an agenda, a hegemonistic agenda in their perception, it's difficult to build a nation. And the response should be honest dialogue. So now, the challenge we have in Nigeria is that all these three elements needed to construct nationhood. A nationhood that overrides the pre-existing disadvantage we already have of extreme heterogeneity in the Nigerian population. These three requirements are completely absent. That's just the fact. It's not, I don't think it's contestable. Compounding these problems is a sense that some political leaders in Nigeria attach more importance to their ethnic kith and kin outside the country at a level that rivals what ought to be their commitment and loyalty to the Nigerian state as physically constituted. The problem with this is that when some groups see leadership acting in these kinds of ways, they will ask themselves, what is our citizenship worth if people who are not officially citizens of Nigeria, but may be related to Nigerians in terms of sharing ethnic nationalities, if people like that can enjoy the advantages of citizenship, what is my citizenship worth? Why am I here? This is a problem. Let me discuss the concept of fractionalization briefly. Harvard University published a study called Fractionalization in 2002. That study found a number of things which common sense can tell us, but it's always good sometimes, even when common sense is empirically established and established with data. They found that countries that are very diverse, ethnically and religiously heterogeneous, have a tendency to conflict. Such countries are more prone to conflict. They have weaker and less effective governance, and they experience relatively weaker economic growth than countries with homogeneous populations. And they found that African countries are the most ethnically diverse in the world. They also found that Japan and the two Koreas, North and South, are the most homogeneous. So African countries are the most heterogeneous, and Japan and the two Koreas are the most homogeneous countries in the world. I want us to note that most large ethnic groups in Europe have their own country. Most large ethnic groups in Europe have their own country. European countries are mainly homogeneous. We have one or two exceptions. Belgium, where you have the Flemish and the Walloons. A lot of tension, but they manage it. The United Kingdom, where you have the English, the Welsh, the Scots, but we also see how they manage it. They manage it with devolution of power. So these are two prominent. You also have Spain, where you have the Catalonians. But over 80 to 90% of European countries are ethnically homogeneous. And this is one of the advantages that they have enjoyed. These arrangements have shifted over centuries. Borders have shifted, as time has gone on. Now, the study also found America has a lot of diversity. They found that. The Middle East as well, significant diversity. But based on all this, I think what we can see is that to build Nigeria into a nation requires us to grapple fundamentally with the challenge of nationhood. This means that we must return to the drawing board, in my view. We must confront the national question. What is the national question? There are three aspects of the national question. Number one, what is Nigeria? Nigeria is an idea, but it's an inchoate idea. It's a creation of the British. That is a physical fact. Number two, do we want to be Nigerians? Do we want this country to survive and succeed? That's the second question. Then the third, if we agree that we should coexist as one country, what do we do about it? How can we best coexist? How can we best make progress? If we agree that we don't want to coexist, what next? It's like a marriage. You have a Catholic marriage where people are said that they cannot divorce, but they may be very unhappy. Or you have marriages that end. There are many countries in the world that have gone either way. Some have even surmounted their difficulties and become successful nations. The United States is one of them. So this is the national question, and we must address that national question. I believe personally, and this is where I am vested, I believe it is still possible for Nigeria to become a successful nation. We can look at the example of Switzerland, which has 4 ethnic groups: the French, the Germans, the Italians, and the Romans. It's a confederation of 26 cantons. There is a federal council, and the presidency rotates every 2 years between the cantons. This is a model. It has worked for them, but they are different. But Switzerland works and works very well. So that's also an example that we can defeat the odds if we really want. But to do so, we need a level of honesty between ourselves as Nigerians. We need a commitment to a larger common good beyond selfish agendas that we, and especially our political leaders, have yet to demonstrate in our national affairs. This is because there's a tendency among people in power in Nigeria to avoid confronting difficult questions. This is a fundamental failure of leadership. The unwillingness to confront difficult questions and difficult situations is a failure of leadership. Our leaders think that if they admit the realities we face in Nigeria, it is to admit to a vulnerability that they do not wish to admit to. And so there is also a tendency among people in leadership to feel beholden more to a part than to the whole. They may feel beholden to their part of the country, but not to Nigeria as a nation, as a possible nation. And this is one of the things that set us back. But the truth is this: greatness, national or personal, often comes from the courage to dare. I dare the leadership of Nigeria to confront the problems of nationhood in Nigeria face to face, head on. That is what leadership requires, nothing else. Burying your head in the sand, claiming that all is well, claiming that I have done this, I've done. No, Nigeria has always been divided. So we're not laying the divisions of Nigeria at any particular head of state or any particular government. Some people will say it has become more divided in recent times. And I gave the example of the 3 arms of government being headed from one part of the country and one religion. That's an issue. So I used to work for the United Nations. I worked for 17 years in the UN. And in the first phase of my career, before my career turned towards economics, I was a political affairs officer in the United Nations, working under Kofi Annan in the early 90s. I handled the Rwanda desk, the Angolan desk, the Somalia desk at the headquarters in New York. I served in the peacekeeping missions in Cambodia and in Croatia. And I also served in Rwanda with the International War Crimes Tribunal. One of the things that I saw from all that experience is that burying our head in the sand will not address our problems. We cannot make progress. It is ultimately self-defeating. So the argument about Nigeria being indissoluble and indivisible, it does not quite accord with the facts and the reality that we have seen all over the world. History is littered with examples of countries that have broken up, either peacefully or violently. We have Bangladesh coming out of Pakistan. We have Pakistan coming out of India. We had the Czechs, Czechoslovakia, which split into two, the Czech and the Slovak, peacefully. We have Ethiopia and Eritrea, 30 years of war. We have Sudan and South Sudan. We have the Soviet Union, which was about 18 republics, and they all split up. They're all countries today. We have the former Yugoslavia, 6 countries today. They were all once considered, quote unquote, indissoluble. Given recent developments in Nigeria, I think the time has come for us to renegotiate Nigeria by revisiting the amalgamation and major historical events that have created hurt feelings and distrust among all our ethnic groups and all our religions in Nigeria. In particular, we need to address the military coups of 1966 and their accompanying casualties in terms of lives, the pogrom and the civil war. We need to pursue reconciliation and then restructure Nigeria with a brand new and truly federal constitution. All of this calls for a grand bargain between Nigeria's ethnic nationalities, including statesmen, in particular, the former military leaders who shaped Nigeria from 1966 to 1999. They have a legacy responsibility and should be involved in this discussion. The Council of State, Ambassador Lisemeka talked about the role of the Council of State. I think certainly it needs to be beefed up. Of course, elected political leaders and the current government of Nigeria have a place in the discussion, but it's not a discussion for them alone. The proposed national constitutional amendment exercise by the National Assembly, in my view, will not be able to address the challenge of nationhood in Nigeria today. It is too deep. The problem needs a more holistic solution that the technical passage of amendments to the Constitution will not address. Nigeria needs a new constitution, not an amended constitution. Let me be very clear. We should make no mistake, while we grant our current elected representatives in the National Assembly their constitutional responsibilities, the path to a new constitution for Nigeria must be much wider than the confines of the National Assembly. Because the matter of constitutional restructuring is tied up with fundamental, intangible issues of nationhood that the National Assembly is simply not well placed or even equipped to address in a conclusive manner. So this is the fact of the matter. And when I talk about democracy a little later, I'll explain why this is so. But let me just briefly address the matter of development. So I've talked about nationhood and the challenge we face and the conditions that we must create in order to build a nation. It's time for us to make hard decisions about Nigeria, whether we want to remain one country, and if so, what is our vision for that country? Nigeria should not continue to exist simply for the sake of existence, while we continue to congratulate ourselves as our citizens become poorer, the security architecture collapses, people's lives are not protected. That's a state of nature where life is brutish and short. We cannot continue to congratulate ourselves. We should measure ourselves. What progress have we made in 60 years? We have had ebbs and flows. We've had bursts and moments of hope, yes. But overall, Nigeria's history in the past 60 years essentially has been a history of decline. That's just the fact. When you look at the economy, when you look at the political stability situation, when you look at the intangible sense of nationhood, how committed are people, how committed are Nigerians to the idea of Nigeria today? When you look at our diplomacy and international affairs, what is our ability to project power and our national interest? Is it as strong as it was at some points in the cycle today? The answer is no. So we have to be honest. Development. Let us look at where Nigeria is. We face a challenge of development in every area. Our human capital index has remained, our human capital development has remained weak. Nigeria ranked 152 out of 157 in the World Bank's 2018 Human Capital Index. We ranked 178 out of 189 countries in the UNDP's Human Development Index in 2018. Human development, of course, is when we talk about the essentials of livelihood, healthcare, education, life expectancy, the job structure of the labor market, and things like that. We rank very low. The World Poverty Clock has ranked us the poverty capital of the world. 100 million Nigerians live in extreme poverty today. That is to say, they earn below $1.90 a day. Unemployment was 23% in 2019, projected to reach 33.5% in 2020. Youth unemployment is well over 50 to 60%. So the country's northern states, our country's northern states, have borne the brunt of poverty. A recent report from the World Bank tells us that 87% of poor Nigerians live in the mainly Islamic north of the country. So we have many challenges, and these challenges have increased. They haven't gotten less, they've gotten more. Now we have the debt crisis. Nigeria is becoming, I don't know, our debt crisis is a big deal. We're borrowing and borrowing, and we are mortgaging the future of our children. The debt to GDP ratio in Nigeria today is 30%. Debt servicing costs are more than 2/3 of government revenue. And in Q1 of 2020, 99% of our revenues went to servicing debt. 99%. What do you say? We are bankrupt. That's the truth. And we are pretending to be solvent by continuing to borrow. So I think there is a problem. And to illustrate how far or how low we have come economically since 1960, I want to just share some statistics with you. I did some research and looked at where Nigeria was in 1963 and compared it with Singapore, with Malaysia, with South Korea in 1963 and in 2019. And I looked at the GDP per capita, which is a better measure than GDP itself, because GDP per capita tells you more about the earning power of the population and their quality of life. In 1963, Nigeria had a GDP per capita of $107. In 2019, our GDP per capita was $2,229. So you can see the growth very low. Singapore had a GDP per capita in 1963 of $511. In 2019, the GDP per capita of Singapore was $65,000. Malaysia had a GDP per capita of $279 in 1963. And in 2019, Malaysia's GDP per capita was $11,000. South Korea had a GDP per capita in 1963 of $146. In 2019, their GDP per capita was $31,000. So these are countries that in 1963, we were all in the same bracket. In fact, in 1963, Nigeria's GDP was higher than that of Singapore, higher than that of Malaysia, and higher than that of South Korea. Nigeria's GDP in 1963 was $5 billion. The GDP of Singapore was $918 million. The GDP of Malaysia was 2.5 billion, half. The GDP of South Korea was $3.9 billion. 1 million, a full $1 billion less than the GDP of Nigeria. Today, we cannot compare. Our GDP is $446 billion. South Korea's is 1.6 trillion. So these are realities. So let's discuss why this is so. Why is this so? Development is a holistic concept. We frequently tend to think it's just all about economics. But in reality, development is primarily a political process before it translates into an economic one. Wherever we have seen development succeed, countries that have made it are countries almost always, they have effective political organization. Their societies are based on effective political organization and leadership and philosophical worldviews. These are now supported by political and economic institutions that can create enabling environments for human development, for economic growth, and for structural transformation. This is the secret of development that appears to have eluded Nigeria. And this is why the challenge of nationhood remains a critical one to overcome if we are to achieve even economic development. The process of development requires a nation with unity of purpose, because that unity of purpose includes the purpose of overcoming poverty and organizing for it. Nigeria today is essentially, first of all, if you don't have strong political institutions, you cannot have effective economic institutions. It is the political institutions that create the economic institutions and empower them and give them space. I want to say, in all honesty, in my own assessment, that every government in Nigeria has tried to make progress for Nigeria. In the time of Gowon, Yakubu Gowon, after the Civil War, there was a lot of oil money, there was a lot of construction and infrastructure, there was economic planning, but there was one mistake we made. We failed to take advantage of the oil boom to save and to begin to transform our economy. In the period of Babangida, for example, a lot of reforms started in the economy. He started trying to liberalize the economy. When President Obasanjo came, you saw the establishment of many strong institutions. You had the EFCC, you had the privatization, you had the Pension Commission, you had the Central Bank Act renewed and reformed. You had so many institutional, you had so much institutional progress. That's also a fact. So I don't want to convey an impression that is just one straight line of failure. No, that's why I said we have had bursts or periods of hope. But each time those hopes are aborted because we have not solved the fundamental problem of nationhood. So today, our economy is basically a rent seeker's paradise. There's no nation, and our political institutions are weak. The focus, because there is no nation, the focus is on the control of political power and patronage networks, not on the responsibility or capacity of political authorities to create economic policies that will bring inclusive prosperity for Nigeria. So that's where we are. And the truth is that Nigeria will not be able to get out of the economic mess in which we are today unless and until we revamp and restructure our constitutional foundations. Nigeria's constitution, as we operate it today, cannot take Nigeria to prosperity, because that constitution is based on a sharing model It's not based on a baking model. You have to bake first. You have to create wealth first. You don't just keep focusing on sharing a resource of vanishing relevance in today's world. In our case, crude oil. So another thing we need to know is that philosophy matters in development. Philosophy matters. Look at the United States. Why do you think it's the biggest economic power in the world? It's because its economy is founded on a philosophical worldview. In Nigeria, when you talk about philosophy, they say, that man just the blow grammar. And that is why intellect matters and intellectuals matter. In countries that have made progress, you cannot push them aside. In Nigeria, the worst lead the best. How do we think that a society like this can create wealth for its citizens? It's difficult. In America, the philosophical basis of the United States is this. They believe in individual freedom. They almost worship it. They believe in innovation. And they have strong institutions. And the purpose of institutions in America is to check the power of the government more, to protect the citizen. In Nigeria, the purpose of our institutions is always to project the power of the government. See, this is an inverted model and it doesn't work. So that's the US, worldview: scientific innovation, individual liberty, and strong institutions. The economic philosophy is clearly capitalist. That is clear. In China, why have they been able to rise over the last 40 years? They have risen because of a consistent application of a philosophical worldview. And that philosophy has three elements. One, the Chinese have a view of time as endless cycles. And that's why Chinese people think in 50-year, 100-year time spans. The Chinese people never think about just tomorrow. But in Nigeria and in most of Africa, we're very short term. You can't become great thinking just about tomorrow morning. You've got to think about the next 10 years, the next 15, 20, 30, and understand that your actions or inactions today determine what 20 or 30 years will look like. That is a philosophical issue. So the Chinese view of time is the bedrock. The second is that the Chinese value stability above everything else. And because of this, the third aspect of the Chinese worldview is that the state matters far more than the individual. So in China, unlike in America, the state matters, the individual matters, but less than the state, because they must maintain order, they must maintain stability. So these are two clashing worldviews. But the thing about worldviews is that they're subjective. But if they're consistently and methodically applied over time, they yield a certain type of result, success. That is why America is developing in a different way, China is developing in a different way, but there are some basic things. For example, innovation. You will see whether in America or in China, innovation is king, because that's how to create capitalist wealth. So economic development requires a very clear philosophy. And I say this because the federal government of Nigeria today is embarked on yet another vision, Vision 2050. We've had Vision 2010, we had Vision 2020, we had the transformation agenda, we've had the economic EPRG, the economic growth and recovery plan from 2017 to 2020. We've had all these visions. That most of these visions and plans failed is no news. They failed. The real issue is why. We must address this if we want our Vision 2050 to be successful, and not yet another story of all the visions before it. So, in my view, the reason these visions have failed is the absence of a clear Nigerian worldview that is commonly shared, inculcated into society as a basis for our country's ambitions. There is an absence of a clear philosophical guiding framework for the management of Nigeria's economy. I have talked myself hoarse about this. Nigeria thinks it's just about economists, so technocrats, this and that. No. What matters for a developing country is not so much economic equations, it is the political economy, the interplay between the politics and the economy, and whether or not there is a founding and organizing philosophy that runs the society. So this is the real issue. We've suffered a lot from philosophical confusion. We're not clear. We've tried mixed economy. We've tried command economy and so on. Just 1 second. Hello, Joe. Joe. Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, sure. So the economy has to be based, I think, on a philosophical basis, and this should be very clear. We need to understand why capitalism works and how it works. We need to understand that if we want to be a capitalist society in Nigeria, we need to have property rights, we need to focus on innovation, and we need to focus on how to create capital. This is what makes capitalism function, and we cannot ignore it in Nigeria. The Land Use Act should be abolished because it traps property in the hands of the state. And if we had freehold ownership of land, instead of going for certificate of occupancy, there's a lot of economic value that could be released into the economy. So this is it about development. Finally, on development, we need to address our population explosion. If your population is growing more than your economic growth, you're going to remain poor. There's a projection that Nigeria will be 400 million people by 2050. 400 million people. So if we continue on that trajectory, but our economic growth, our population growth rate is about 3%, but our economic growth rate hovers around 1%, 2%, and we're falling in and out of recession, that is a recipe for poverty. Let me wrap up with a very quick word about democracy, because you need a political system that can grapple with these issues of nationhood and the issues of economy. And I was a candidate for the presidency. It was my honor to present myself to the Nigerian people in 2019. And so I have just a few takeaways that I can share very briefly. Number one, Nigeria has had civilian rule since 1999, but not real democracy. And the reason for this is because of the rigging of elections. So it's not the will of the people to a very large extent. There are some exceptions. Second, Nigeria's challenge of nationhood has twisted our attempt at democracy, because democracy has now become another form of fractionalization, which I spoke about earlier. Because we are competing for power, not on the basis of vision or ideas, but on the basis of tribes and religions. Third, there is a very big difference between politics and leadership. Nigeria has many wonderful politicians, but very few leaders have emerged. Real leaders have emerged from the political process. If you want leadership in Nigeria, go to the private sector. You'll find a lot of it there. But in the public sector and in the politics, you find a lot of politicians, but very few leaders. Leadership is a different thing. It's about vision. It's about the ability to mobilize, inspire, and to organize for progress. Now, fourth, for democracy in Nigeria to bring development, we have to begin to elect leaders who are competent and visionary enough to help the country achieve its development goals. Five, there is no one-size-fits-all democracy. We can fashion our own type of democracy in Nigeria. The democracy in Switzerland is different from the democracy in the United States. In America, for the presidency, they have the Electoral College. You can lose the popular vote and win the presidency. Trump lost the popular vote to Clinton and still won the presidency. George Bush lost the popular vote to Al Gore and still won the presidency. In Switzerland, democracy is very direct. So there are different kinds of democracy. We shouldn't be shy to imbue our own democracy with our own characteristics and our own culture. 6, we need to focus on empowering the people in whose name we practice democracy. Nigerian citizens are disempowered in Nigeria's political process. And Nigeria's so-called democracy is a game for politicians for their own purposes. 7, the youth. We need to get the youth to become more active in politics. 8, it is difficult for democracy to thrive in the midst of so much poverty. When people are so poor, they can see an election as an opportunity to get a quick fix. But of course, they don't realize that in getting that quick fix, they're making themselves poorer because they're selling their destiny to people who don't deserve it. They will have the power, but they cannot make life better for you. 9, we need to look at democracy at the local levels. We are ignoring local democracy in Nigeria. In some states, governors think it's optional to have a local government election, and there is no consequence. So we're all focused on the presidency and all those things, but governance at the local level matters a lot. That's how successful countries are run. Finally, Nigeria needs comprehensive electoral reform. That's what I have to say on democracy. Now, to conclude, we are 60 years old. We are at a fork in the road. What is the ultimate purpose of a nation state? It is to protect us. It is to create an enabling environment for our prosperity. And I suggest that we begin to focus our minds on this. The ultimate purpose of a nation state is to protect us and to ensure the welfare of citizens. Where this does not exist, it is dishonest to demand the loyalty of citizens because the basic social contract does not exist. I wish Nigeria well. I pray for our success, and I hope that we will find in ourselves the will, the strength, the effort, the honesty to address our real issues. Let us stop burying our heads in the sand. Let us think about how to create a real nation that Nigeria can become if we're serious about it. Thank you very much for the honor to address you. Thank you very much, Joe, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ambassador Olisaemeka. It was a very big topic. I had to spend some time with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kingsley Moghalu. This has been a very interesting lecture, and Your Excellencies, I'm not going to attempt an immediate summary of what we've heard because of time. We've actually gone past what we hope we will be able to do. But for every issue that Kingsley dealt with, whether nationhood, whether development, or whether democracy, the most important thing to take away from the lecture is that he provided solutions, what we need to be doing as a nation in order not just to stay together, but also to catch up with the rest of the world. And on that, Kingsley, I want to thank you. We'll do that later, but I want to open the floor for questions. I'm sure there are many people who want to ask questions on conversational meeting, more or less. And so if you want to speak, please indicate. And then we'll more people participation in conversation. Yes, I can see Ambassador Kingsley and A.Y. Shehu. Ambassador Kingsley, please. Please, as you make your contributions, try and be brief as you can. Just your questions or your comments so that we can actually save time and be efficient in the management of time.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And thanks, Professor Moghalu, for your brilliant lecture. We are all enthused and you know, you have succeeded in widening our horizon and sharpening our intellect on where Nigeria should go the next 60 years regarding nation building. Now, you made one very important distinction between state nations and nation states. And that for many African countries, including Nigeria, there was a lot of fanfare becoming a state. We have a territory, we have a population, we have a flag, we have a national anthem. And that goes for many African countries. For countries like the United States, apart from the homogeneity that you mentioned, there was also the American War of Independence that created a sense of national consciousness. And in doing that, of course, many people have said that Nigeria is still a fragile state. And it's a nation that is developing, and you enumerated that. But I'm intrigued by the reference to the philosophical foundations. At the moment, what creates our leadership is the political parties. The political parties that do not have, well, I'm not sure whether there's any marked difference in their ideologies or manifestos. Now, philosophically, we have a lot of individuals who have what you have espoused, but how do you get there? That is my question. Thank you very much.
The floor to A.Y. Shehu. A.Y. Shehu, please.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I would like to begin by congratulating Professor Moghalu for an excellent presentation, analyzing the various national issues that we should really engage on. And remarkably, his characterization of the perception of our current situation in Nigeria, which has divided Nigeria into three main categories of those who believe that the situation is irredeemable, those that believe that yes, something can be done, and those who feel that nothing is wrong. There are two questions I would like to ask. Whilst he addressed all the issues very well, there are two things that I will think we need further discussion, and I don't know whether he is the one to respond to or the organizers will take it for further discussion. The first has to do with his call for a new rather than an amended constitution. You can see that over the years since 1999, we have tried several constitutional conferences to address the problems of Nigeria, and yet we could not. At the moment, we already have a National Assembly. Do we have to dissolve the National Assembly before we can start the process of enacting a new constitution, or we will still have to use the very fragile political structure of the National Assembly in order to design a new constitution? This is something that bothers my mind. The second thing, which has to do with historical record, which Professor Kingsley Moghalu started with, that the amalgamation of Nigeria in 1914 was done for two purposes. One, for the convenience of the colonial powers, and secondly, in order to use the wealth of the South in order to service the North. I think that this is an error. we need to do further research. Currently, everybody knows that the South is really servicing the North in terms of national revenue. But at the time we started in 1960, historical record evidence that the North was more viable in terms of income. And if that is not the case, I think we need to do further research in this area so that we can put the facts in proper perspective so that we don't misguide our dialogue. With this, I thank you very much, the organizers, for giving me the opportunity to participate in this forum. Thank you, Your Excellency.
John.
Thank you, A.Y. Shehu. A.Y. Shehu, thank you very much. To your first question, you were not so sure whether it's the organizers or professor who should answer. It's the professor who gave the lecture, and he will answer, not the organizers. Just on a lighter note. I give the floor to, as I can see, Ambassador Igali. Ambassador, God knows Igali. Ambassador Igali, Dr. Igali, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, particularly my senior colleagues and other colleagues, I want to join others to express appreciation to our association for organizing this, and it's a great privilege to be in this conference with our father, Ambassador Olisemeka, who has, in his usual manner, given us a very great charge. And Professor Moghalu, my good friend, congratulations. Mine is a comment, and I'll make a brief quick question at the end. The comment is that I think that sometimes we're not fair to ourselves in Nigeria. I say so because this past few weeks, we've had a lot of assessment of the journey we have taken in these last 60 years. And we sometimes gloss over the great achievements that we have made as a country. I agree that there are areas of challenges, and I'm happy that Professor Moghalu has also alluded to the fact that no nation is in total bliss. There are always challenges of monumental proportions in different nations, and nation building is a continuous process, a process that never ends. And that's why the American Constitution continues to undergo amendment. And parliaments all over the world exist for continuous making of laws to make their nation states or make their states better. So we have issues, we have problems, but as a country in the past 60 years, I think that we've moved rather greatly ahead. Politically, yes, there are areas of challenges, but if we look at our development, for example, we wanted space, political space for self-expression. From 4 regions, we are now at the 6 states, and who knows, we can increase to maybe 50 states in the future. If we look at the infrastructural development, for example, in 1960, we had only 1 university. Today, we have 152 universities and over 650-something tertiary institutions, all producing critical human manpower that we need to develop our country. Yes, we have great challenge of unemployment, and that is where we all have to collectively work to address that problem at private sector level, federal government, and individuals. At time of independence in 1960, our GDP was $4.7 billion. Today is about 448 billion. In 2014, we even got to about 568 billion. So we're not as unproductive as we have been. So I think what is critical now, and I end there, and that's the question to Professor Moghalu, what role does the elite have to do? I think that there is a deficit in our elite rising up to the occasion in being able to advance the cause of this country. We, the elite, take the responsibility for the areas of challenge, and we have to keep working on them to improve on. But my assessment is that we've done well, and let us as the elite work more greatly towards building this country, which has a great future for all of us and more for our children. Thank you very much.
Good next now. Where is it? Please put it on, let me see. Yes, Ambassador Abdul Wahab, goodness is good. You have the floor. And
Thank
please
you,
do make it short.
Your Excellency. Want to thank first of all our doing Ambassador Olisemaker for his brilliant address, and also thanking Professor Moghalu. First of all, I want to refer to the historical aspect of Professor Moghalu's presentation, that you said the coup failed. I want to put it that the coup did not fail because I was a small boy at that time, but I can remember what happened. Senator Nwafo Orisu was the Senate president. And Dr. Azikiwe was not in Nigeria at the time of the coup. He was sick. He was couping in one of the hotels in Surrey, in London. So after the coup, he sent a message to the Nigerian High Commission that he wanted to speak with Jora Ironsi. But no means to contact Nigeria at that time. So he went to the secretary of Dr. Azikiwe, went to the Foreign Office in London. To cut the story short, the Foreign Office said, oh, you should have spoken to Zana Bukar Dipcharima. So briefly, if the coup did not fail, Dr. Nwafo Orisu, the Senate president, should have handed over government to Zana Bukar Dipcharima, which did not happen. So the government was handed over or was taken over by General Ironsi. So that is the correction of the aspect, the historical aspect, which you mentioned. And that's well documented in the Foreign Office in London. I want to make that one brief. And also about the federalism. We enjoy federalism in Nigeria at the beginning when we had the 3 states, which Ambassador Olisemeka referred to now become 4 states with Middle West. We were doing well before the coup. It was this coup that started, was the beginning of the problem of our country, Nigeria, and that should also be well noted, as you mentioned in your lecture. So it was after that the military government of Nrosi imposed unitary government on Nigeria. And you said in your lecture that our GDP in 1960-63 was very good compared with now. So we were doing well, if not because of that coup that brought us into this crisis where we are today. I agree with you, we need a commission of truth, reconciliation, forgiveness, and then we can move forward in Nigeria. Because I think there are certain aspects of our behavior that we must discard. And without that, Nigeria cannot progress. We must discuss this behavior, both leadership and followership. Injustice, lawlessness. Number 3, indiscipline. Number 4, and corruption. And something big is missing in our life in Nigeria, and this is love. We don't love ourselves, and without love, we can never develop and we can never progress. Briefly, I thought you were going to dwell on your area of specialization when you were Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria. The issue of remittances to Nigeria is a serious issue which you did not address. For example, in 2018, the crude oil fetched Nigerian government $23 billion. But Nigerians in diaspora, they sent in, they wired in, they remitted to Nigeria $25 billion. Could you let us know how this money was accounted for? Some allege it was a deal between the central bank, the bankers in Nigeria, and Bureau de Change. Those money remitted into Nigeria by the Nigeria in diaspora were not well accounted for at that time. And even now, we are not sure how that money was used. Was it used for the interest of Nigeria interest as a whole? Or some people cornered that, remittances, and then they shared it, or they had a deal about it. We want to know. Then the rate of exchange, I remember, I was working there in NBC TV when Naira was converted to pound sterling. Naira was from pound sterling to Naira. Okay, it was 1 Naira to 1 pound. and 1 naira was 1
1
naira.
second more,
This
1
difference.
second more.
So
Please.
1 second more, please. I have to talk because this is a very serious issue affecting all of us, and we have to correct some errors if there is any. So the rate of exchange today is 465 naira to $1. My dear Professor Moghalu, how do we get here? This is a very serious problem. The other issue is the physical allocation. I agree with you. Nigerian states, most of them are not economically viable. They are waiting to get allocation from the federal government. I've never seen state where where states are waiting to share money, to consume, not to generate revenue. So these are the areas we are going to look into. However, we pray that Nigeria will become a very, very successful nation. And I thank you, the organizers of this. Thank you very much. Long life Federal Republic of Nigeria, and happy celebration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodness is good. Nice to see you looking healthy and well.
Thank you.
Professor, you now have the floor to respond to the comments and the questions that have been asked of you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Clear.
Okay, please, just before I continue, can I get the name of the ambassador, the last speaker, who's still on my screen?
Abdul Wahab. Oh, goodness is good.
Okay. Okay, Abdul Wahab. Okay.
Madam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me just very briefly address the questions. I think very excellent questions. The first thing I need to say, is that I'm going to send my lecture, which has the full expression of my thoughts. And I'm sure that Ambassador Shinkai and Ambassador Joe will share them with everyone. And so there may be some questions that time did not permit me to go into. For example, some of the issues on the economy that Ambassador Abdul Wahab raised, including the exchange rate. So I made comments on those things in the lecture, in the area of development, but I didn't, because it was a very wide-ranging topic, 1 hour was not enough to do justice to it all. So that's the first comment I want to make. Let me just answer the questions very briefly. Ambassador Kingsley has said we have individuals who have vision and capacity, but the question is, how do we get to where we're going? The answer to that lies in two things. One is the role of the elite itself, which Ambassador Igali raised. Our elite in Nigeria has not performed the function that elites in most societies that have done well have performed. Our elite have tended to enjoy their success a little bit selfishly, but they do not make the sacrifice of engaging with broader issues in the society, trying to bring pressure on the politicians, trying to influence the political process, trying to influence people in the polity on what factors should you consider when you're voting for somebody. Are you just focused on tribes? Are you focused on religion? Or should you be focused on this and this and that? So our elite is self-serving to a large extent. They have not given back to the society in a way that is selfless by trying to influence the collective success of the country. And I think we have to begin to do this. This is one of the things that motivated me to present myself as a candidate for the presidency. I'm not naturally a politician. I never thought I would ever go into politics, but I was just concerned with the state of the country. And I felt I had a vision. I felt I had some capacity, and I felt I should put that before Nigerians. It was a huge sacrifice for me because I spent my own personal resources in that effort. So this is the sort of thing I'm talking about, that a lot more of us should get involved in the larger issues of our politics, our economy, and so on. So this is one way. The second way is that the youth, we have to try through policy, especially educational policy, to create a new generation of young people who will lead Nigeria's future. One, they have to be skilled. Two, they have to have values. What's the value system in the society? What's the value system that is governing our youth today? So let us find a way to reach our youth and influence their value system in a very positive way. And let us create educational systems. And I'll address that when I come to Ambassador Igale's question, that empower young people to be productive and to be able to create jobs for themselves. So that's one answer that I have. Ambassador Shehu, you talked about whether we can have a new or amended constitution. Should we dissolve the National Assembly? So let me answer. That's a very important question. I am not proposing that we dissolve the National Assembly. And I think it's very clear that the National Assembly has to have a role in the promulgation of a new constitution that I recommend. But I am saying that the National Assembly itself should not be the only space where we discuss this. My proposal, and you'll see it in my lecture when I send it, I propose a grand bargain between the ethnic nationalities of this country about the Nigeria they want to see, or even if they want Nigeria at all. You see, because the problem is quite deep. So today, our politicians do not have the legitimacy that, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, but they don't have legitimacy because of the rigging of elections. And so many people do not feel that our democracy represents our real leaders. There are many people who look to Arewa Consultative Forum, or they look to Ohaneze, or they look to Afenifere, the elders, with more respect than they look to people in the National Assembly. And am I not saying the truth? That is a fact in Nigerian society today. So the political system does not have the kind of legitimacy it should have because of the culture of rigging and the way our politics has gone on, and it doesn't produce the right kind of people as our political leaders. So people don't respect it as much as some other things. So there are a lot of statesmen and other groups who have to come together with the politicians to discuss Nigeria's future. And when there is a consensus on what Nigeria should look like, that can then be presented to the National Assembly to be able to enact a new constitution. I propose that they pass a 1999 Constitution Repeal and Replacement Act with the new constitution. So they have a role, they have a constitutional role, but I don't think we should limit it only to them. It will not solve our problems because we've had a lot of these constitutional amendment exercises. None of them has had any real impact. Nigeria's challenge of nationhood requires that Nigerian people sit down around a table and discuss Nigeria and what type of country they want to see. So that's my answer. Amalgamation, the economic reason, amalgamation, very important point. Now, in the lecture, I said, again, you'll see it in the written form, that although the amalgamation of the country had this whole context, but that when we now had a regional constitution in 1951, from 1951 or so, and the regions were created, this problem of the North being subsidized by the South went away. And the North itself was able to develop its economy to stand. This is a fact. The North was not dependent on any other region between then and 1966. So I said that the introduction by the intervention of the military and returning to a unitary model of governance now distorted the system again. But in terms of the amalgamation, I'm quoting in terms of its purposes from historical records. So it's not an opinion. I'm not giving an opinion about why Nigeria was amalgamated. I've done the research and I quoted what Lord Harcourt himself said, the colonial secretary, and so many other sources make it clear that this deficit financing of the northern region by the colonial office was a problem for the colonial office, and that they were explicit in several comments and documents that amalgamation was one of the ways to end it. So, like I said at the beginning, there are many truths in our history that are uncomfortable, but I think all of us will just have to be open-minded and to accept these things and work towards building a better country. So that's not my opinion at all. I was just quoting research, historical records. Now, concerning Ambassador Gali talked about nation building being a continuous process. I completely agree. The job never ends. The American society today still has issues. We've seen the Black Lives Matter. For all their wonderful philosophies, they had slavery as the original sin. And the consequences of all that are still in American society till today. So I totally agree with that. I might disagree a little bit with the general picture of where Nigeria is today. He talked about 152 universities. That is true. We had University of Ibadan, then we had Nsukka, then we had Lagos and all that. And then now we have 152 universities. That is true. But what is the quality of the education that these universities are giving us? What is the quality of, what is the level of access? Have we traded access to education for quality of education? So this is an issue. If we say every village has to have a university, because politically that is a good thing, but what is our labor market situation today for all these numbers of universities? The real issue, in my view, is that we have to reform the education system. We have to reform the curriculum. We have to create better educational infrastructure. We have to change the pedagogy, the way our people learn. We have to move more towards practical vocational skills and science and technology, because that's what builds modern economies. And so I propose a curriculum of 60% vocational and technology and science, 40% everything else. So this is my view on the matter. We have a lot of improved infrastructure, that is true. But you see, this is the mistake a lot of governments are making. You can be building infrastructure, but the country is decaying from inside. The soul, what is the soul of Nigeria when we're so divided? So this is the point. And when you see a lot of countries that are making progress, you see this foundational philosophy that rises above their differences. That's what we need to do in Nigeria. It's not enough to say we're building railways, we're building roads, or we're building universities. That is an empty shell. When you have the citizens themselves, half of them are saying they don't want to be part of this contraption anymore. So that's the point I'm trying to make. And I did say, as Ambassador Gali recalls, that yes, we have made some important areas of progress. No question about that. But when you look at overall, and even on the economy, I showed that our GDP per capita, which is the most important thing. Again, when you read my lecture, you will see what I have to say about GDP growth. It is an illusion. It is not. What matters is, human development. The GDP per capita is part of that. And you can see that we haven't done as well as we should over the past 50 years, 60 years, compared to many other countries. And we just need to completely revamp the way we manage Nigeria's economy. But what you have is the state getting in the way. I've spoken about the role of, then on Ambassador Abdul Wahab, the Nzogu coup did not fail. I take your point. These are all historical points. So I take that point. And I think there is some validity to what you're saying. Those are the details of the coup. And I want to say to you that I actually agree that the military intervention in Nigerian politics was the real beginning of Nigeria's problems. That even though Nigeria had a lot of problems up to the founding and in the first, eventually, if the civilian, look, in 1964, there was a coup attempt in Tanzania. Who quelled the coup attempt? Troops from Nigeria were sent to Tanzania in 1964 to quell a coup attempt.
And then this.
Well, look at how it all turned out. Nigeria itself fell under the influence of the military. Tanzania continued as a democracy. So the democratic process, if you want to play if you want to go that way, it's something that you have to give time. It will keep evolving. So I think the military intervention really did Nigeria a disservice. Not just the first coup, the second coup, and the civil war that followed. All those things. Whatever the intentions may have been, I'm sure there were frustrated young men who said, "Oh, there's corruption." The politicians, okay, they talked about 10%ers in 1966. Well, what would Nzogu say if he was alive in Nigeria today about corruption? I mean, so these things. So people are just misguided. They just felt because it was fashionable in Africa, all these politicians, crooks, and all that. No, you let the democracy work itself out. So I agree with you that military intervention has not really helped the country. So those are, then on the questions about the central bank, let me speak about remittances and the exchange rate very briefly. Remittances are mostly personal transmissions of money by people who live in diaspora to their relatives, and so on and so on and so forth. So it's a lot of money that and keeps many Nigerians afloat. But they mostly come through either Western Union or through banks. They don't come directly through the central bank. And the central bank can regulate how they are transmitted, but the central and the National Bureau of Statistics and the central bank will try to capture the statistics, but the central bank does not control remittances because those are personal transactions between people and their families at home and so on and so forth. So that's my point. So I don't think there's an issue of accountability about remittances as such. But the exchange rate, many people talk about the value of the naira. What determines the value of a currency is simple and short. How productive is the economy? How complex is the economy in its diversity? If an economy manufactures value-added products that are increasingly sophisticated and over a wide range, at least not just one product, but at least 4, 5, 6, 7 areas of strength and complex manufacturing for export, they will earn foreign exchange from those exports. And the value of the currency will reflect the underlying productive strength of the economy. The value of the naira has been falling for decades because Nigeria's economy does not have any underlying productive strength. The economy has been mortgaged to the worship of the god of small things, where Nigeria's successive leaders have worshipped at the altar of oil. Every morning, a lot of Nigerian leaders wake up monitoring the oil price. But you're exporting a raw commodity. Look at the Gulf states. They built refineries long ago, decades ago. So they were making money from refining, they were making money from selling crude. Not only that, they established sovereign wealth funds, huge sovereign wealth funds that have built up savings. So when the oil price, we don't control the oil price. So when you rely on a raw commodity, the price of which you have no control, the value of your currency is tied to the price of oil. So because the price of oil determines how big our external reserves are. So when trading partners and business people look at your external reserves, the oil price is low, external reserves have fallen. They are wondering whether you have enough reserves to cover 12 months import or 6 months import. It's a matter of demand and supply. So the way to solve the naira conundrum is this. It's not by what is happening now. No, what the central bank is doing will not solve the naira's problems. It is what they're doing, what the government is doing, especially since 1915 or 1916. There's been a lot of populism in the management of the Nigerian economy. When the value when the oil price fell in 2014, late 2014 and 2015, you have to adjust your currency to that reality. But if you now start trying to maintain a fixed exchange rate, which we did for almost 2 years, The laws of demand and supply mean that on the black market, the real value of the currency will be trading, but you are keeping an exchange rate that is fixed, and people who have connections to power in Nigeria will come to the central bank or to banks and get money at the fixed exchange rate, which is cheap. And then they, instead of importing what they told you they're importing, they'll go and sell it on the black market because they'll make 10 times more profit. So this is what I talk about. We are running a rent-seeking economy. And the sooner we just set all these things free and remove those opportunities for rent-seeking and come out with a policy, trade policy. If you are devaluing the naira or floating the naira, you must have an accompanying trade policy that says as follows. If you import luxury items, you must pay high tariffs for it. Then you create support for local industries so that their production is competitive in terms of price. And then you don't have to spend all your forex defending the value of the naira. But how can you do this if you have sold yourself to China? The imports from China are cheaper than producing locally. So you must first of all make local production competitive. You must know how to slap tariffs on imports from China within the confines of the world trade rules. But if you see China as your financial lifeline, will you have the political will to slap tariffs on Chinese imports in your economy? Your answer is as good as mine. So everything comes back to the politics, to the political leadership, to the will, to the vision, the worldview, and that's where the answer is. So thank you for the opportunity to answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Professor. And at this point, I can see no hands up, which indicates that we eventually come to the. Is anybody? Second National Vice President, Ambassador Kingsley. Oh, sorry.
Well, thank you, Mr.
I hope you can hear me, Ambassador Kingsley. So we had a
yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, moderator. The doyen of the Akan, Ambassador Olisemeka, I want to first of all thank Your Excellency for sharing this occasion and also for giving us your views, as you have always done, with all brilliance and the experience that you continue to bestow on us as our role model. Your speech or your opening remarks was very rich in content and set the tone for the brilliant presentation that we have had. Are you hearing me? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. I can hear you. I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as I was saying, I want to express our deep appreciation to Ambassador Lisimeka once again, and also use him as the point of contact to all our elders that have always been there for us, Ambassador Gusulire, Ambassador Atta, Ambassador Clark, and all the elders that have always been very there for us to guide us. I want to thank you, sir, for your brilliant presentation. And coming to our guest speaker of today, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, as usual, you are a delight to hear. And I've had opportunities of hearing you in Ijebu, where you spoke on Awujale's birthday, and also your interaction with the VOR on the issue of restructuring. And we are honored, highly honored by all that you have been able to give us today. Nigeria is a country in the progress, and we are all interested in the growth of our nationhood. And we believe that we will get there as long as we have people like you, we have people with brilliant minds who also will be able to shape our country as we move forward. 60 years into nationhood. We in Akan are very conscious of our role. We were representatives of Nigeria in various capacities at home. And we believe that we have things to give back to our country. Well, not very into politics, but we know that 2030 is around the corner. And we hope that, Professor, you are not giving up on Nigeria, that you still come back to have the brilliant ideas to share with all your colleagues. It has really been a very brilliant lecture. And our interest is how does not shape our foreign policy postures. We are practitioners, or we were once practitioners, and we continue to provide inputs as much as we can to our government on the way we should go. This is what explains why in all the series of lectures we have, we want to see the foundations. How does nationhood, how does development, how does democracy relate to the posturing of our foreign policy? And we believe that, yes, we are not there yet, but we will get there. You have given certain indications of what can be done. We are not in this platform or in Akan recognizing any revolution, but constructing the constitutional foundations that will take us to where we are. And you've made the point about the need for ethnic nationalities to come and shape the type of country that they have, either through restructuring or through constitutional amendment. And you've said that it is not panel beating our constitution. It is more of reconstructing, and we will get there. So once again, I want to thank you for having time to give us this brilliant lecture. And we want to thank also our president, the vice, the chairman of the panel, the members of the committee, all excellencies, members in Lagos branch and in Abuja that have supported us in ensuring that this series of our lectures really get the desired objective. We are all interested in the Nigerian project, and we believe we will get there. Once again, I want to thank all the people that hooked in into our program that kicks off our series of lectures for the independence celebrations. And we do hope you will join us also in other series of lectures. Once again, I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me join Professor in thanking Kingsley for the lecture as well as stand members of my team, Ambassador Nationhood, Bode Adikeye, Folonsho Otukoya, Chris Ade DC. And I want to offer a sincere apology because I just on Thursday, where we shall be having Bishop Matthew Kuda to take the stage as our second speaker lecture series. And on that note, again, I thank each and every one of you. I sincerely appreciate the presence of Ambassador Mr. And I say thank you. It's been a long day, and see you all again on Thursday. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay.